This is Stephen Eckert Roshi, and I'd like to discuss a little bit about scientific materialism and Buddhism, and also a little bit about the new atheism versus the standard brand of atheism in the past. The new atheism being, if you'll excuse the term, evangelical about its pursuits, whereas the old atheism was just a philosophical stance. I think they're considered different. Now, I got a note from someone saying that, explaining to me that Stephen Batchelor wasn't referring to theism, for instance, in his title of his book, Confessions of a Buddhist Atheist, but that he uses the term. And I understand what theism is. Theism is technically a belief in a personal God. And as I stated in an earlier talk, Buddhism is non-theistic anyway, so there's nothing to that. It might have been the publisher that decided to use the title. Essentially, Mr. Batchelor's arguments, as well as Stephen Blackwell's, who was another person who's involved in Zen without Buddhism, so to speak, is that there is such a thing as Zen without Buddhism, and that it doesn't require a transcendental metaphysic or anything like the doctrine of rebirth and karma to still be authentic. I would differ, and I would say that, in fact, without the doctrine of karma and the doctrine of rebirth, Buddhism makes no sense whatsoever. And I don't know how you would practice it. I suppose you could do meditation, Zen-like meditation or whatever. Maybe someone can enlighten me about this. I would be interested in hearing it. I've had a little bit of dialogue with Dr. Blackwell through one of the websites. Tried to explain as best I could that Buddhist doctrine basically holds that sentience itself, consciousness, is the ground of reality. Now, this sounds like solipsism in a way, but it's not, because in the same way that the observation of quanta collapses it into one state or another, in the same sense that consciousness, you might say, collapses, in a sense, the material world into a concrete form for us. That form is predicated to a great extent upon our own arrangement of sense data, the way we see the world as a human being with our own particular senses, which are different from other animals who perceive the world differently. We don't have any organs for heat or to be able to detect electrical impulses, for instance. So we construct our world, and this is described in detail in what's called Paticca Samuppada, or co-independent origination, Buddhist doctrine. But Buddhism's goal is to attain nirvana, to transcend the common way of thinking, the common way of being. It is based on a transcendental metaphysic. Scientific materialism is based on the materialist metaphysic. Now, there are some that are going to quarrel with me and say that scientific materialism, physicalism is the metaphysic. It most certainly is. It's a metaphysical principle, just like God or something else in that particular ultimate perspective. People use the term science in a rhetorical sense to give them authority. They feel like they have the authority or the weight of this thing called science, which doesn't actually exist as a thing, of course. As I said, it's a rhetorical device. Science is nothing more than the various scientific enterprises, and as one person put it quite simply, it's what scientists do. There is no complete uniform opinion about about anything really. A few things perhaps, but not. Certainly there's the Big Bang Theory, for instance, and there's plasma cosmology. Steady state is one example of basic cosmology. And there's a lot of arguments over the role of genes and how the biology of the cell affects speciation, etc., more than genes or as much as genes, and so on and so forth. There's all kinds of different arguments, different thoughts in science. Someone used the term superstition concerning rebirth, as if it were kind of a fait accompli. We understand that rebirth is superstition, but we don't understand any such thing. It may be to that individual or to other people. First of all, you'd have to understand exactly what that person meant by rebirth. But the tendency towards some scientific materialists, physicalists, and particularly among the New Age atheists, is to wage an attack using ad hominems, basically to attack the person by saying he or she is essentially irrational for believing what they do. And that the rationalist, atheist, skeptic, has science on their side, which is not exactly true. For one thing, physics supervenes into quantum physics, and as we know, quantum physics is extremely counterintuitive. It involves all sorts of strange phenomena, and we've avoided trying to think about that in return to and particularly and specifically in terms of biology for years. One prominent atheist physicist said a few years ago in a book that it's nonsense to believe that in something like a quantum mind or quantum consciousness, because we know that there's no evidence that it doesn't, the quantum state doesn't decohere before it could, have any effect in the synapses, etc. But now we know that's not the case. As a matter of fact, physicist Arthur O'Connell was able to achieve quantum effects, entanglement, and non-locality in metals for quite some time in an experiment. We also know now that quantum effects exist in the cells themselves, in photosynthesis, and flocking in birds, and light hurting, and numerous other things. We don't know why it doesn't decohere, but it doesn't. That appears to be pretty obvious. So given that, I think we should be a little more humble about, our ultimate metaphysical views. Do I believe in rebirth? Well, in the sense that I'm 66 and I was 16 at one time, and every cell in my body has been recycled since then, and the ideas about myself have been recycled even faster. Yes. Do I believe that that my consciousness will exist after this physical body? Well, it's existed after the changes that I just discussed have happened. I believe that there is some body of evidence to show that that may be the case in Dr. Stevenson's work, Ian Stevenson and others. Of course, skeptics are going to scream bloody murder at the very mention of that. They just seem to get many people, just skeptical people, are different than skeptics, I might add. Skeptics are professional defenders of the Newtonian paradigm, of the materialistic paradigm that sees everything as little billiard balls of matter, even though we know that isn't the case anymore. The problem with the problem with the new atheism is that there's so many vitriolic attacks on people who disagree with him. I once counted, did a filtered through some websites, new atheist websites and skeptical websites. On one website I found 10,000 references to idiot or imbecile or something like that in regards to, one website alone. In the brief little talks that I've done on here, we've got all kinds of abusive language, the F word, and, you're an idiot, you're an imbecile, you're whatever, simply because I disagree with them. This is not the sign of a rational mind. Now, there's been some interesting research done in the relationship of one's views about religion and to the relationship to one's parents. this has been fairly well researched by psychology of religion and sociology of religion experts. And it seems that there is a definite correlation between whether one is an apostate or a believer and the relationship with one's parents, particularly one's father. And that holds true for apostasy as much as it does for religious qualities. And when you read some of these websites, the skeptics and atheists, you find all kinds of references in their websites to their negative experiences with a religion or religious father, mother, etc. So I personally believe that rationalists are no more rational than those who call themselves religionists. They may be more logical in regards to their ways of looking at things. I mean, I myself am not a theist. And I'm not absolutely convinced of rebirth in the sense of existing from one realm to another. However, Buddha was abundantly clear that he did not teach nihilism. He did not teach that human consciousness or consciousness was exterminated with physical death. He also refused to discuss what does exist. I just put it as just pure consciousness. That's my understanding anyway. And you have to go into some pretty complicated Buddhist philosophy to explain that. So is rebirth a superstition? Well, perhaps. I mean, you certainly could say that. That's fine. I think that many of the claims of some of the scientific materialists are grossly simplistic. They choose to even ignore quantum effects and the possible ramifications of it. They will not look at any data or information which might prove opposite of their worldviews. And they're as wedded to them in many cases as the fundamentalist Christians are wedded to theirs. So that's been my experience. But there's also many people who simply have come to their conclusions that they don't believe in a personal God because it doesn't seem logical to them for numerous reasons, which of course atheists will be happy to explain to you. And I, to a certain extent, agree with that. But I don't think I have the final say in anything. I do have somewhat more of a say as far as what Buddhism is concerned with, and certainly it's hard for me to understand, and someone will have to enlighten me, how one can be even quasi-Buddhist and not understand the doctrine of karma and a rebirth, or completely reject it. Because without that, most of Buddhist teaching is pretty much incomprehensible, or at least it's completely inconsistent. Why would one try to attain nirvana if you're going to attain nirvana in a sense simply by one's physical extinction? What's the effort for? But people, I think, are intoxicated in some cases with a form, basically, of Zen. They like it, you know. They like to be called a Zenist or a student of Zen. I don't really know what they're studying. Zen is about enlightenment. That's my understanding after practicing it for nearly 50 years. So that's my little take on things. Now, I probably will get a barrage of insults from certain people. I've been called idiot and imbecile and God knows what else on some of these responses to the talks. And that doesn't surprise me at all, because many of these people, the more intelligent ones, are quite polite, Kevin Solway. But there are people out there who just throw insults out as if, you know, that's all they know. And I'm very sorry for their disturbed mentality. Anyway, that's it. Thank you very much.